Hey, Chef Ro here. Today we're going to make caramel, but this is a very specific kind of caramel. We're going to make caramel sauce. There's caramel candies, there's caramel for the bottom of flan, there's caramel sauce that you think of for ice cream. We're going to do the caramel sauce that you think of for ice cream today, and each one of those three is made slightly differently. Caramel candies, you put everything in the beginning and stir the whole time. Caramel for flan and caramel sauce, we start with only the sugar and a little bit of liquid, and we do not stir under any circumstances until the color has been achieved that we're looking for. Okay, the reason why is that something called crystallization will happen, and it's a real pain. Okay, basically what happens is sugar wants to go back to its original form, which is little crystals, right? So they'll pop up on the sides of the pan, and if you stir, it causes them to agitate, and they'll turn back to their original form, and then that causes a chain reaction. If you've ever tried to make caramel and you've had a problem with there being like a film that comes over the top of your pan and it looks kind of like hard sugar crystals, that's exactly what's happened. Now, the way that classically you have been told probably, or many people were taught, including me, that you do this to prevent the crystallization is you sit there with a cup of water with a pastry brush in it, okay? Has to stay in the pastry brush because if a single crystal is introduced back in, it's over, right? And you sit and you watch the sides and you brush it down the whole time. Well, I was taught a little trick that I'm going to now teach you. It involves some very highly specialized equipment. Now, a clear bowl, a glass bowl, works even better because you can see it a little bit better, but a lid or a metal bowl or some sort of covering device is all you're going to need, and then you won't have to sit and babysit it quite as much with the brush, okay? Now, it is very important what kind of pan you use also. You need a straight-sided pan. You don't want a curved bottom pan. You need a straight-sided saucepan because what you want to make sure is that the temperature within the pan is the same exact temperature in the entirety of the pan. That way it cooks the sugar at an even rate. Okay, so I've got sugar in my pan and I'm going to show you how we get this started. I've got a little bit of sugar here in my pan, and I've got just enough liquid to cover it. Now, if you want to do a flavored caramel, like a Jaeger caramel or a whiskey caramel or a rum caramel or pick a booze, or any other flavored liquid, this is what you would use, is that flavored liquid. Now, you can't really see around here, but I've got a few little granules of sugar that have popped up. So all I do is I get my fingers wet, and I just wipe around the edge of it, okay? And every time I start to feel sugar, I get them a little bit wet again. And you want to be careful not to disturb the sugar at this point because that'll just cause it to jump back up on the pan, okay? So now that I have all of my sugar dissolved on the sides of the pan, I can now turn my heat on, okay? Here's where the trick comes in. Now, I've seen people use plastic wrap. I've seen people use glass bowls. I've seen people use metal bowls. I've seen people use lids. I've seen people, it doesn't really matter. What the key is here is that you're having something to cover the pan. That way it does the job of the brush for you. Because as this boils, steam will come up. It'll hit whatever's covering it, which will then go to the sides, fall down the sides of the pan, and it'll essentially do the wiping for you. So this is what's going to cause the sugar to remain uncrystallized. So I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to show you when we come back. I'll show you when you know you can take the lid off and feel completely comfortable leaving that lid off. It's time to remove my lid. Okay? You can see here that all of my sugar is completely dissolved, and that's when you know it's really safe. If it's really rapidly boiling here nicely and there are no sugar molecules that are left in the granulated form, that's when you know that you can safely remove that lid. Okay? You still don't want to stir though. Okay? Now we're going to start looking for a color, and the more liquid that you had in the beginning, the longer it's going to take, because all the liquid's going to have to evaporate off before the sugar will start caramelizing. You can cheat a little bit by putting a little bit of corn syrup in there. And if you put just a touch of corn syrup in your pot, that will also help inhibit the crystallization. So that's why so many candy recipes and things call for a little bit of corn syrup or invert sugar of some sort. That way it'll prevent that crystallization from happening. I'm going to let this keep going, show you what we're going to look for. You'll notice that the bubbles are going to start getting bigger and these little ones will go away. That's when we know we're getting close. What we're looking for here is a small wisp of smoke. That's how you're going to know that it's just about ready to watch. The darker you let the color get, the less sweet your caramel is going to be. The lighter you keep it, the sweeter your caramel is going to be, because once you add the cream and the butter, the sugar will basically stop cooking. So you need to determine whether you're a sweeter caramel or a less sweet caramel. You just want to be very careful, because once it gets past a certain point, it turns over into bitter and acrid. So we don't want to let it get there, but the less sweet you want it, the darker you need to let it get. You can see here that I have my smoke coming out, and you can see in the pan that it is starting to change color. Okay, now I'm perfectly safe to give this a little bit of a swirl to even it out. Okay, now I like my caramel a little less sweet, so I'm going to keep going just a touch, but this would be a very good place to go if you like very nice and sweet caramel. I'm going to keep mine going barely more, just for another few seconds, because remember, whatever shade of color it is now, by the time we add our cream and our butter, it's going to lighten up significantly. Okay, you can see that just a few seconds more is going to make a huge difference in the color. You can see, if you look here, that it has gotten much darker. This is about where I like to stop my caramel. Now, ideally, you're going to want your cream and your butter to be at room temperature, or some people even warm it up a bit so that it doesn't seize up once we add it to the sugar. And do be careful for steam burns, because they can happen. This is another reason why you want to have a taller pot than you think, because if you notice, my volume just about tripled in that short little span of adding some cream and butter. Now I'm just going to whisk this all nicely together. And in my bowl there was the cream, the butter. I usually put a little bit of salt, because who doesn't love a salted caramel, and a little bit of vanilla. Those are the flavors. Now if you want your caramel a little creamier, you can add a little more cream, right? But here is my beautiful caramel sauce. And no, the heat's not on, the sugar's just retaining that much heat and it keeps boiling, okay? So right now you think, oh, that's very, very thin, and there's no way that that's a sauce. I assure you that once it starts to cool, it will get much, much thicker. Now you know the secret to making a perfect caramel sauce, so you can stop buying the jarred stuff and make your own from scratch whenever you like.